Okay, today we're going to talk about some angle pairs. We'll go through some key definitions and then talk about some relationships. So, the first pair of angles that we're going to talk about are called vertical angles, and they are angles that are formed by two pairs of lines. So, if we take a look, let's start with a nice picture. I think the picture makes this very clear. So, we have one line, a second line, and they are intersected right here. So that intersection's a point. And when we talk about vertical angles, they're the angles that are across from each other when we have those intersected lines. Okay? And something very helpful and useful to know is that they are going to be congruent. So they are congruent angles that are formed by a pair of intersecting lines. Okay, and so there's actually a second pair of vertical angles here on the side. So we have two pairs of vertical angles created by these intersecting lines. All right. The next is a linear pair. Again, we'll start with a picture. I think this helps. We have a straight angle or a straight line cut, and we have a ray here making an angle. And so we actually have two angles. And so a linear pair is a pair of angles that are adjacent and that just means that they share a side and an angle, and form a straight angle or straight line. Okay? So a straight angle, as we know, is going to be 180 degrees. So those two angles together are going to make 180. All right. Let's talk about adjacent angles. Adjacent angles are two angles that share a side and a vertex. So when we look at this, we can have two angles, and we can see this middle side here is shared between the two, and the vertex is common. Now, a couple things that are not adjacent angles. If we were to take a look at this and we go here, these are not adjacent angles. They share a side, but not a vertex. Okay, so those are not adjacent. Also not adjacent, excuse me, if we take our angle here and we have one on the inside, this angle and the larger angle are not adjacent because they cannot be overlapping. Okay, so that's a key part of our definition. No overlap. Okay, keep moving on. Complementary angles. So complementary angles are two angles that add, or their measurements add, to 90 degrees. Okay, so the most basic picture here is if you have two perpendicular and then they form, so this is 90, and we have two angles that make that. Now, something to keep in mind is that they do not have to be adjacent. So we could take these same two angles, separate it, and as long as they add together to make 90, they are considered complementary. All right, the last of our definitions here is supplementary angles. And those are two angles that add to 180. So as we can see, the linear pair that we had up above is in fact supplementary angles, but also would be true even if they are not adjacent. As long as they add together and make 180 degrees, they are supplementary. Now, something that helps some students remember this is that supplementary forms an S, and half of that S is a C, and so complementary angles is half of supplementary. Again, this makes 90, this makes 180. So some people find that helpful. If that was helpful, great. If it's not, you can forget it. So finally, we take a look here and look at our relationships. So looking for complementary angles, we're looking for angles that are going to add together to equal, and equal 90 degrees. At this point, without being able to actually measure these, there's not any that I can tell right off the bat that are going to be supplementary, complementary that is, but supplementary, all of these linear pair. So this angle here makes a nice straight line. So 1 and 4 are going to be supplementary. 1 and 2 are going to be supplementary. 3 and 4 will be supplementary. 2 and 3 will be supplementary. The same on the second intersection down here. We have 5 and 6 will be supplementary. We'll have 6 and 7 be supplementary. 7 and 8 will be supplementary. And then so will 8 and 5. So we have a bunch of pairs of supplementary angles, and all of those angles that we just had there are also linear pairs. So all those pairs that we just talked about are supplementary and they are linear pairs. So they are going to form a straight line and make 180 degrees. Then we also have some vertical angles. Again, vertical angles are across from each other when two lines form an intersection. So we would have 1 and 3, 2 and 4, 5 and 7, and 6 and 8. So those are all vertical angles. And then we also have adjacent angles. Now, adjacent angles are angles that share a side and a vertex. So we would actually have that same list of linear pair are all adjacent angles as well. Okay? So that covers our angle pairs for today. We'll go ahead and practice with those.